Information presented on Sky News Real Estate is general in nature. Viewers should seek their own professional advice before purchasing products or services. Sky News Real Estate may receive a fee for commercial arrangements with companies featured in this programming. Sky News Real Estate. Smart investing.
Hi, hello and welcome to Smart Investing. I'm Chris Gray. On tonight's show, if you're buying a home for a family with 2 grown-up kids, how do you find a property that will keep all 4 of you happy? Most people invest in property to give them financial freedom, but is money all that matters? And how do you stop yourself from getting buyer's remorse? Well, joining us tonight is Paul Gordon, CEO of Catalyse APAC, and Charles Tarby, Chairman and owner of Century 21 Australasia. Well, welcome to the show, guys, and for the first time for you, Paul.
Thanks,
You've
Chris.
got a pretty interesting job that most people wouldn't have heard of. Do you want to explain to the viewers exactly what you do?
Sure. Well, I guess I'm the lucky guy. I get to help people make hard decisions. And that's a blend of decision science, and yes, there is a science of decision-making, and human behaviour. And I guess what my company does is huge decisions. Should we buy submarines? Should we invest in helicopters? Should we, I don't know, restructure our business? And all the same principles apply to property investing and buying a home.
Well, we've got a simple thing. We're not spending $1 billion, maybe 500 grand or $1 million. So say if you've got a few investment properties and people are often going from swinging one way to another, how should people try and go about making that decision?
Oh, tricky one, that. I guess a few things. Firstly, make sure you've got enough properties that you're considering. The research shows that improving your decisions are much better if you have more things to consider. I don't mean find 500, but I mean find half a dozen. So if you've only got 1 or 2 that you're looking at, see if you can find some alternatives.
You know, I struggle with that because, you see, if you have too many, you know, you go into a Chinese restaurant and they have up to 100 different dishes. You know, that's too many choices, isn't it? You'd sit there, you wouldn't make a decision.
Yeah, that's why I'd say half a dozen is a good number.
Yeah, you're right, because you'd be in a real dilemma if you had too many choices.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually what's happening in our marketplace right now, Chris. There's more and more choices coming up now, whereas before, maybe a year ago, there were very few choices. So I think right now we might be battling the fact that there might be 10 opportunities, whereas a year ago there might have been only 2. That's where we're heading with the marketplace right now.
And so with suburbs, Charles, because obviously one suburb is hard to compare one to another, how many would you normally recommend that they look at?
Yeah, but you see with auctions, the auctions is the same. We always look at auction percentages, but the majority of auctions are held in premier areas or areas where the properties are unusual. And so you don't really get a broad look at what's happening in most of the marketplace. And so that's the same with listings. You know, you're going to get a choice of up to 10 or 15 now in some locations. And most suburbs, probably most suburbs, you've got a big choice, because I'll talk later on about the stock levels, how they've been climbing every single week in the last few months. So I think that it really does come down to suburbs at the end of the day, and your job's going to be very, very different in different suburbs across the country.
So Paul, how do you find with different investment properties what is the best one?
Well, a great question. I think the most important thing to do is to say, well, okay, what do you mean by best? Best for you, best for you, best for me, completely different things. Now, it might look like good in terms of financial return, but it's all the other things that actually make the difference. And, you know, why are you in property investing? It might be for a long-term future, for a secure family. It might be because you want to ride the wave. It might be because you want to be better than your mate. So getting clear on that, the kind of things that really matter to you, will then help you choose what's better for you.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because you and I will go and look at a property and we'll look at, where's it located or whatever. But I've not looked at it from that perspective. I've been around the industry for a long time, but somebody comes in to see me, generally it was, I'd like to buy a house in this area or so on. But all of those variables are really quite impressive.
See, I'd turn it into a spreadsheet and almost wouldn't look at it, whereas other people will be 100% visual.
I like the last one, if you want to be better than your mate. So that's a good one.
The funny thing is that's often driving our decision-making, even though we don't realise it.
Funny,
so, yeah, it's going on underneath, even if we can't distinguish it.
And then a lot of people talk about gut when they're making decisions, whether it's business or kind of personal or something. Should you take that into account?
The honest answer is absolutely. In fact, don't want to blind you with neuroscience, but the way our brains work, you can't take the gut out of a decision. It's the way we're wired. So when you kind of What I'd always say is if you've got a gut feeling against a decision, then often that tells you there's something you haven't considered that you should have considered. It's not that your gut's wrong, it's often that the way you made the decision is wrong.
Sounds to me like the gut's part of the science. So there you go, just like
exactly right.
Now,
fantastic.
That's really the real estate agent's job, isn't it? Is to make that first impression, that first gut decision, a positive.
Being a real estate practitioner requires a lot of emotional intelligence, there's no doubt about that. And we've been told that from an intellectual point of view, we're not supposed to get around that, because if we do, we don't have the licences for it. So it does come back to how you read people and how you read their circumstances, and you see that a lot. In the days when I would sell real estate, you know, some people you wouldn't shake their hands, there were some females you wouldn't shake their hands, some females they expect you to shake their hand, and a way in which you, right down to that, at that point in time, you either had a relationship started or you were gone from that moment on. So we will learn as real estate practitioners to become emotionally intelligent. And I think if we match some of the science to it, we could really strengthen the emotional intelligence in our industry. Have you got a business card on you?
Absolutely, yeah, of course.
Now, Paul, let's give you a bit of an example. Say someone's trying to find a house for a family of 4.
Yep.
They've got maybe teenage kids, so they might actually listen to their kids rather than if they're kind of little ones, they might actually get a say in where they're going to stay. How do you get 4 maybe completely different people to all agree on the same house?
That's a really tricky one. First thing I'd say is, and some families might find this impossible, let's sit down and have a conversation as a family. Let's go around the table. So, you know, Mrs. X, what matters to you? What really matters to you? You know, Kid X, what matters to you? What matters to you? And get everyone to get that on the table. And the important thing is, much as we might find it hard to do this, when Kid X says, what's really important to me is being close to my mates, we might laugh and go, oh, that doesn't really matter. But what's really important is to go, OK, that matters. So you said it, it's important. Get that down on the table, and then you've got a consistent basis for making that decision. Because, of course, what happens if you don't do that? You buy the place, you move in, everyone's miserable. Why are they miserable? Because the things that matter to them no one even knew about. So I'd say get it down, get it on the table, and then use that as a basis for your decision making.
Now, as buyers agents, quite often, Charles, we talk about marriage guidance. I've never had to deal with the kids, but I've dealt with husband and wife. I guess as the real estate agent, you want, I mean, you hear of stories, you want the kids to choose their rooms, don't you? And where's the dog going to go? Because then whoever's paying for the house almost hasn't got a choice then.
They don't, and the children do have a very strong influence, otherwise you wouldn't have all of that advertising at McDonald's and businesses like that too. But at the end of the day, one person's going to make that decision, and you, as a real estate practitioner, have to work out who that is. And it does take a while, because it's not always the old man is the head of the household thing. It's often quite a long way away from that. And I think that when you look at the fact that, I think, and I'll probably get belted up for this, that female real estate practitioners who have had a family are better adept to real estate practice than their male counterparts, because they know how to run a house. And so when you know how to run a home and you're dealing with somebody in the family, a female or a male, you're better adept. What is that?
Better adapted and adept.
Thank you. Well, to present, I wasn't very good. I didn't get many holy cards at primary school for my spelling or grammar. You're better at being able to present a property to the needs of that individual, because you've understood the needs of that individual first before you show them the property. And I think from that sort of perspective, that's why I think female real estate practitioners that have had families...
And a lot of agents these days team up and partner up. So is it quite a good, from a sales perspective, to have a male and a female together? To go for those different sides? Yeah,
well, it's sometimes not practical from a dollar perspective to do that. But, yeah, if you could do that, that is great, because you get people that come in, you have a very short period of time. If somebody's out that weekend and let's say they've been out to see 4 or 5 or 6 other agents over the last few weeks, you've only got a very short period of time to understand everything about those people and then show them the right property, because there's something they may have seen with the last agent that they're ready to buy. And if you're not able to communicate straight across exactly what you're trying to get from them to find out where they should go or where you should take them, more importantly, because people need people to help them make decisions. I've found that over the years. And if you don't help somebody make a decision, they'll generally walk away and make the wrong decision. So to do that, you have very limited time. So if you could, that would be great, but practically it just generally doesn't work that way.
Now, Paul, to try and get 4 people sitting around a table, I guess some people don't even have a table these days, and they're not used to doing it. And I guess the kids, trying to get them, I mean, do you maybe have to get them on Facebook or something like that, or Messenger to get them in? How does a typical family do it these days?
I'll be honest, typically a typical family doesn't do it, and that's why often people are unhappy with their results. So what I'd always say is find someone else to bring in, a family friend, I don't know, the au pair, someone that can come in and at least help, I guess, not exactly referee the conversation, but at least help the conversation along. Because as soon as, you know, let's say the head of the household, whoever he or she may be, is kind of, well, I'm driving this, then everyone else just kind of shuts up and it kind of goes their way.
You mean whoever she or he may be. Let me
exactly
get this right. Get this right. But that's a very good point, because in all work that we do now, when we're interviewing team members or when we're reviewing team members, it's got to be an open door policy. You should have a third party in there to listen or adjudicate or take notes. Those things are really important nowadays, particularly in the politically correct world we're in. And it's very, very difficult to deal with a husband or a wife or a gay couple. We just don't know nowadays. You really don't know. So you've got to be incredibly mindful of everything you say.
That's why politically correct people like you and Tom are so good for the industry, Charles. And on that point, we'll move on to the... You should not put Tom and I...
At
that point, we'll move on to the auction clearance rates before we get into trouble.
For that. So I don't know, that wasn't much of a segue, was it? The auction clearance rates were really interesting this week. Down, down, down again, 55%. If you listen to the 60-minute, should I be talking about 60 Minutes? If you listen to the 60-minute production on Sunday, which I caught a glimpse of on the weekend, you would think that we were headed for an absolute disaster. And I think they interviewed a couple of people. Some I'm not sure of their credibility or ability to really comment. Sometimes they talk to people who are about numbers, but they don't talk to people who are real out there, not one or two agents, but a selective
And
group.
also, you don't know the whole sentence, you don't know the whole conversation.
I could tell it was cut. You could tell parts of it were cut. But clearance rates of 55% are still reasonable in any marketplace. They're not great. You've got to work harder. The agents have really got to work the floor in auctions and so on. Sydney was really quite low when you look at the marketplace. It came at 52.6 with 665 auctions. In Melbourne, not much better at 57.2%, 995 auctions. Now, this time last year, they were over 1,100 auctions, 1,200 auctions. So it's significantly different also with the ratios. But Canberra came through as 68.1%. The highest clearance rate, and it was higher than any other capital city. But the two capital cities that performed better than this time last year were only Brisbane and Perth. Now, again, we've been talking about these marketplaces for a while, and they performed better than last year. And they're the ones I watch closer than the ones that are performing worse than last year, because we know the market's changing in most parts of the country, but there are other parts of the country which are still pretty good.
And look, I watched the 60 Minutes as well, and I was commenting on Facebook today about taking things with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
And, yeah, you got to hear the whole conversation. Yeah. I didn't see Harry Dent on there. Did I miss him, maybe?
I thought he produced that segment.
You never know, do you?
You just don't know, do you?
Well, on that point, we'll move to homes advertised for sale.
Increased, up 0.91%, up over again since we looked at this over the last couple of weeks to 9.77%. So we're almost getting into that double-digit figures of more properties advertised for sale than this time last year. So there is a change, and that's normal. I mean, you've got more stock on the market, fewer buyers. Well, what do you expect the market to do? Continue to rise? It's not going to rise. It should have gone down 2 years ago. We had that extra boom, which we shouldn't have had, because the interest rates dropped more than they should have. People got a bit excited. I still think prices will go back to what they were 2 years ago, pre the interest rate drops that shouldn't have occurred. So I think people should be mindful of that. Those that bought in the last 24 months need to really be careful about their budgets and whether interest rates rise, whether they're going to get caught. They're the ones that need to be careful.
And if you need to refinance, make sure your personal spending isn't up, because the banks will be onto it.
Yeah, well, they're not giving you much out there right now.
Rent price movements.
They were up again, plus 0.69%. The capital city's still at worse than this time last year, worse than this time 3 years ago. Sydney's still coming back, and Darwin's still coming back. And the cities that are improving are Brisbane, that's going well. Melbourne's still going okay. Hobart's still flying. I don't know how long that's going to last, but it's still well ahead of the game and any other capital city.
And finally, the vacancy rates.
Some great news around the vacancy rates. Melbourne was 8.84 or something last week. It's 0.74 this week, so it's been sitting in there. There must be people pulling their hair out there trying to get, present company excluded, trying to get properties for rent in Melbourne. Sydney was 2.3%, pretty good. But here's the good one, 6.79% for Perth. Have not seen it in that range for a while. It was 7s, 8s, up over 10s, 11s. It's been nudging back. So collectively 3.28% for those three capital cities. But again, Perth, clearance rate's better than this time last year. Vacancy rate's down to 6.79%.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Thanks again, Charles, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
Well, coming up after the break, how do you deal with the nagging feelings and questions of doubt that often plague us once we bought the property? Stay with us.
You're watching Sky News Real Estate. Smart investing.